Integrating DNS into Active Directory is a really smart move when you're using Active Directory, and as a result, you're probably going to hear about this on the exam in one form or another. Now let's back up just a bit before we talk about Active Directory integration. Let's talk about DNS itself just a second here. DNS is a network service that's based on standards. You don't have to have Active Directory for DNS to function. But when you integrate it with Active Directory, you get some pretty important benefits, and that's what I want to talk about in this video. Now, first of all, let's back up and get some terminologies down that you'll need to understand. When DNS is not integrated with Active Directory, we set up DNS on a server, and then we give it some DNS data, some IP addresses and some English names, and we say, you know what, correlate these and answer questions anybody asks about this. And so that DNS server stores that data that we create and give it. And then it manages that data for a network or a portion of a network, however we set it up. Now, at that point, that server is what we call authoritative for that data. If we have a question and we need the definitive answer about that data, this is the guy or gal to get it from because that server is maintaining that data the way we set it up. Now, the data that is being stored on that authoritative server is also known as zone data, or really any DNS data that's stored as a unit is called zone data. And this server is storing the primary zone data. Now we can take another DNS server, build it on our network, put a replicated copy of that primary zone data for redundancy and some other things, and this data that's on the replicated copy is called secondary zone, and data replication keeps those two in sync. So lots of things we can do with that. I won't go into it right now. So you have a primary and a secondary zone out there. We replicate from the primary to the secondary to keep everybody in sync. And as you can imagine, replication can become a problem on the network. Well, now let's talk about what happens when we choose to integrate DNS with Active Directory. When the DNS service is configured on an Active Directory domain controller, you'll have the option, and it's just a little checkbox, to integrate with Active Directory. That DNS primary zone gets copied into Active Directory into a proprietary zone type, and that zone information is then replicated to all domain controllers as part of Active Directory's normal replication functionality. And dynamic updates are supported for domain members. Now, what's a dynamic update? We'll go back to DHCP. If you remember, clients are starting their machines up. It's contacting a DHCP server saying, give me an address. That address has a lease. It can go out of, can expire. And then we get a new address. Well, those addresses can be dynamically updated into DNS so that our DNS server knows all the time exactly who has which IP address. It's pretty cool. Now, how is this integration achieved? Well, when you're setting up DNS and you're on a domain controller in Active Directory, it will ask you, do you want to integrate this with Active Directory? Or you can configure it in the DNS management tool, and I'll show you that in just a second here. Now, for the exam, I want you to be careful here. Member servers running DNS cannot be integrated with Active Directory. You have to be running DNS on a domain controller. A member server running DNS can function as a secondary server, though. So keep that in mind. Keep these two statements in mind, and that will help you navigate around some of the slightly more confusing questions that you might run into concerning Active Directory and DNS integration, okay? Now, let's go out to the Server Manager, and I want to show you, if I go into the Tools section, I did that kind of quickly. Let me slow down here. If I go into the Server Manager, to the local server, I click on Tools, and I go into the DNS Management tool, you're going to notice that I've already set this up. I just added the DNS role to this server, and then it picked up my Active Directory. So here are my forward lookup zones. These were set up for me when I set up my DNS server, MSDCS, and that's the name of my Active Directory domain. You haven't seen an Active Directory domain get created yet. That's later on in the course, so just kind of trust me here, okay? But notice on this lookup zone, if I right click on this and go to properties, you will notice that the type is Active Directory integrated. I can change this if I would like. And I can set a zone type, and I can just uncheck this, and it will not be stored in Active Directory anymore. That will basically unintegrate it, okay? Well, I don't want to do that. I want to leave it integrated because as many Active Directory domain controllers as I put out there, it's going to automatically replicate that information around, give me great redundancy, and also give me multiple DNS servers, if you will, out there that can answer requests from clients. So that's a real quick look at Active Directory integration. It simply means we're going to store that primary zone in Active Directory. We're going to replicate it automatically around all the other domain controllers, and then those are available to serve information out. Any changes? This is multi-master replication. Any change that's made to DNS on any domain controller gets replicated to all the others, along with that normal standard Active Directory replication. So that's a quick look at Active Directory integration.